You know, for nearly half a century, the entire world lived under the shadow of a really strange kind of conflict. It wasn't fought with massive armies meeting on a battlefield, but with spies, with proxy wars, and with the constant, terrifying threat of complete nuclear annihilation. This was the Cold War, a 45-year standoff that totally reshaped the world we live in today. So how did it all begin, and what were the rules of this incredibly dangerous game? Let's dive in. To really get the Cold War, we've got to start at its most dangerous moment. Picture this. It's October 1962. For 13 straight days, humanity was right on the edge of a nuclear holocaust. Seriously, it was the absolute peak of tension, a moment where one wrong move, one single miscalculation, could have ended civilization as we know it. And this declassified CIA map shows you exactly why everyone was so terrified. The Soviet Union had secretly put nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For the very first time, major American cities were within easy striking distance. The two superpowers were literally eyeball to eyeball, and the fate of the entire planet was just hanging by a thread. That event, the Cuban Missile Crisis, was the absolute high point of what we call the Cold War. It was this long era defined by intense competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. But here's the crucial part. We call it a Cold War because it never boiled over into a direct, full-scale, hot war between them. And ironically, the reason why is because of the very weapons that made it all so scary in the first place. So, how on earth did the world get to that point of near annihilation? To understand the rivalry, we have to rewind the clock and go right back to the beginning, back to the ashes of World War II. So, in 1945, the Axis powers were finally defeated. The world celebrated, of course, but that victory created this massive power vacuum. The old European empires, they were basically in ruins. And out of all that rubble, two nations rose up with the economic and military power to influence events literally anywhere on the planet. And you can see it in these two iconic images. On one side of the globe, you have American soldiers raising their flag over Iwo Jima, a powerful symbol of their victory in the Pacific. And on the other, you have Soviet soldiers hoisting their flag over the Reichstag, right in the heart of a defeated Berlin. The very allies who had just fought together were now becoming the world's two biggest rivals. And look, this wasn't just a simple rivalry over land or resources. No, this went way deeper. It was a fundamental clash of ideas, of ideologies. The Western Alliance, led by the US, stood for liberal democracy and capitalism. The Eastern Alliance, led by the Soviet Union, was all about socialism and communism. It was truly a battle for the future of society itself. Now, you'd think that with two opposing superpowers, both armed to the teeth, a catastrophic war would be inevitable, right? Well, that didn't happen. And the reason why is one of the most important and, frankly, one of the most terrifying concepts of the 20th century. The world pretty quickly split right down the middle into two armed camps. In 1949, the US and its allies in Western Europe formed NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Their whole deal was an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And so, in response, the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact in 1955 with its Eastern European satellite states. The lines were officially drawn in the sand. And this division just created this vicious cycle of fear. Both sides were so suspicious of each other that they were constantly preparing for a war that they hoped would never come. They built up huge stockpiles of tanks, planes, and soldiers. But most importantly, they got into a frantic race to build the most powerful and destructive weapons ever imagined: nuclear bombs. And this is where that strange paradox kicks in. The very thing that made the conflict so horrifying is also what kept it cold. It's a concept called the logic of deterrence. Basically, both the US and the USSR had enough nukes to completely and utterly destroy the other country, even if they were hit first. And since there could be no winner in a nuclear war, just total annihilation for everybody, neither side dared to actually start one. But just because the superpowers weren't fighting each other directly, that doesn't mean the world was peaceful. Oh, not at all. The rivalry just moved to other parts of the globe, turning regional conflicts into high-stakes battles on a global chessboard. These were the arenas of the Cold War. Places like Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, the Congo. The superpowers would back different sides in these local wars, fueling conflicts that, while they avoided a direct US-Soviet clash, still resulted in millions of deaths and left entire nations completely devastated.
So while the superpowers were playing out this deadly game, not every nation was willing to just be a piece on their chessboard. A lot of countries, especially newly independent ones, refused to be treated like pawns.
I mean, think about it. If you were a new country just breaking free from colonialism in Asia or Africa, the big question was pretty simple. Do we really have to pick one? Is it either Team USA or Team USSR with no other options available? And for many, the answer was a resounding no. They created what was called the Non-Aligned Movement. Founded in 1961, it was this big group of nations that offered a third option. They basically refused to join NATO or the Warsaw Pact, and they were determined to forge their own independent path. This whole movement was spearheaded by some really influential leaders: Nehru of India, Tito of Yugoslavia, Nasser of Egypt, Sukarno of Indonesia, and Nkrumah of Ghana. Together, they represented a powerful new voice on the world stage, a collective of nations that were demanding their own sovereignty, free from the domination of either superpower. And this joint statement from three of the founders just nails their philosophy. They argued that you can't find real peace by splitting the world into two armed camps. Instead, you have to aim for global cooperation and expand freedom for everyone. In a world defined by division, this was a pretty radical idea.
For decades, this tense, fragile balance held. But, as we all know, nothing lasts forever. And over time, the ice of the Cold War started to crack, and eventually it began to thaw.
You know, after the shock of almost blowing up the world during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think both superpowers had a pretty serious "what are we doing" moment. They started to grasp the immense danger they were in. A simple accident, a miscalculation, it could trigger the apocalypse. And that shared fear led them to slowly, cautiously, start talking to each other about managing their nuclear weapons. This shift led to a series of really important arms control agreements. Things like the Limited Test Ban Treaty in '63, which banned nuclear tests in the atmosphere, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in '68. These were crucial first steps away from the brink, designed to slow down the arms race and stop more countries from getting the bomb. And then came the moment it all officially ended, 1991. The Soviet Union, which had been weakened for years by a stagnant economy and growing demands for freedom, just dissolved. With one of its main players gone from the board, the Cold War was finally over. But here's the thing. The conflict ended, but its legacy is absolutely everywhere. It's in the military alliances that still exist today, the political borders you see on a map, and yes, in the thousands of nuclear weapons still waiting in their silos. So the question we're left with isn't if this 45-year rivalry still defines our world, but how.